Hey everyone, welcome back to the Tone Base YouTube channel. And we are back with the Bitcoin Law Review. This is one of my favorite shows. And man, so much has happened in the world of crypto that is related to regulation and law. And to break it all down for you today, we do have three esteemed lawyers. Maybe a few more will join us. Let's do a little intro. I probably picked up a bunch of new followers that haven't seen this show in months. We have Bill, David, and Sasha with us. Bill, just very brief intro and remind us what's up in your world lately.
Hey, Bill Restis, Restis Law Firm. I'm an attorney here in San Diego. I am lead or co-lead counsel in several major crypto class actions, and I also represent blockchain projects, helping them comply with and avoid regulation. The most exciting thing in my world, though, is I'm an entrepreneur in several other respects, and one of my companies that I'm involved in just launched this water here called Scent, and it's got this little scented ring. I'm shilling this on your show. I can't help it. It's got this little scented ring right here, and when you take a sip, you get the flavor of passion fruit or whatever it is. It's pretty cool.
Let me put your full screen, Bill. Do it again. There you go.
Scent water. Pretty dope. Really, it tricks your brain into thinking that you're ingesting something. But look, David, everybody's laughing at me for shilling. At least it's not a blockchain project this time, right?
What are you talking about, dude? You're promoting. You're now a promoter.
I know, but I'm not selling stock in it, baby.
No, it's fair. No, this is totally fair because like I get you guys on this show. Literally, it's not legal advice, but it's legal suggestions to help people. So please, you are welcome to shill as long as it's not a scam, or David will sue you. Speaking of David, David, what's up, man?
Okay, David Silver Miller. I am just a little guy in a little space, but I do sue everyone crypto related. Lately, my big cases are going right now: Coinbase, Kraken, Monkey Capital, Daniel Harrison. For the people who know Daniel Harrison, he's showing up lately. But it's been a good time. We're actually litigating cases right now. You know, I'm not just stacking them up. Litigation's going on. So it's going to be a really interesting 2019 as we got a bunch of these cases actually set for trial. So come listen. You'll hear me say, I'll sue anybody and everybody. But the most amazing part is in the last 2 months, I've started hearing from the early promoters and owners of companies who now want to sue their own partners. So lately it's been whether I'm willing to dabble in cross-fighting. You know, I'll use one example. You know, people related to Tether who got screwed in Tether now want to sue each other and will like pick a side and start suing. So we'll see how that goes.
Dude, that's amazing because that's how you find out what the hell is really happening under the hood of that project.
Oh my God! I started the call by saying, "Do you know who I am? Have you looked me up? Do you see what I say?" I'm like, "I believe Tether is a fraud, an out-and-out fraud." He's like, "It's not. It's legitimate. I can prove it's legitimate, but they stole all my money."
Oh, this is awesome. Oh man. All right. And last but certainly not least, we have the lovely Sasha with us again. Sasha, what's going on?
Oh, hi, Tone. Thanks for having me and all of us here. Not much is, nothing as exciting as the litigation going on with the others, but I do have I got certified to teach blockchain law to other lawyers for 9.5 CLE credits in Tampa at Blockspaces. So getting ready for that on November 17th and 18th. It'll be an 8-hour course and then making that into a video series 1 hour at a time. So that's been kind of exciting. And then I was traveling last week at the Vegas CryptoCon with Lynn Albright and still working towards either getting clemency or working on this 2255 motion. And she asked if I could kind of mention the petition on today's show and see if we can get any more signatures on there. It's a petition if you go to freeross.org. And we got in touch with Michael Cernovich, and he took us to a Donald Trump Jr. rally, which was kind of the closest we've gotten to she needs Donald Trump to look at the situation and, you know, give a pardon. So it was a step closer on that front. So that was kind of exciting. And then the week before that, I went with Tatiana Moroz on the Contra cruise, which was a lot of fun there too. Got to meet Naomi Brockwell, who I've been a fan of hers, her, you know, YouTube shows for quite a while. So it was a good last 2 weeks, but I'm also glad to be home and get back to some more hard work.
Yeah, no, that sounds cool. I'm actually in Naomi's home country of Australia at the moment. And
Right.
yeah, no, very cool. And speaking of Tampa and Block Space, I will also be there teaching my workshop, I think on December 15th. So a few weeks after you.
Mm-hmm.
All right,
Yep.
Let's jump right into it. I'm gonna go to screen share and let me see, which screen am I sharing? Here we go. We're gonna start with a quick follow-up before we get to the breaking news of EtherDelta. And the quick follow-up that we have is on Ravencoin. So Dr. or Jade, oh man. So Mr. Pepe, his letter, their lawyer, the lawyer for Ravencoin, or an independent lawyer who likes Ravencoin and holds Ravencoin, his letter apparently succeeded, and Binance listed Ravencoin. They announced it on the 12th of October. They announced that they will be listing it, and here's what happened to Ravencoin. So here is Ravencoin on Bittrex, where it was listed earlier, and this is the day that it got listed on Binance. So pretty much that day, the price went up about 75%, and about 70%, and then over the course of 2 or 3 weeks, the price went up 370%. So just general thoughts. We did a huge deep dive into Ravencoin with Bruce Fenton on the show. Bruce was very open, maybe a little too much so, about how much Ravencoin he has and all the work that he's done in order to promote Ravencoin. So does something like this, you know, justify the fact that Ravencoin is this decentralized currency like Bitcoin, and or does something like this make it look, you know, it is more ammunition for the regulators to potentially say, no, you are clearly profiting? General thoughts real quick, and then we'll move on to the, you know, the breaking news of the day. I don't know, David, Sasha, you guys want to jump in?
Okay, I'll jump in. So basically, my thoughts are simple. One, I agree that Pepe wrote the letter. You know, he was acting as a lawyer basically for a centralized authority when he did that. Two, I do not own Ravencoin, but I typically buy coins after I meet people and speak to them directly, because I feel like if I like them, I'll buy their coin. So what you're telling me is I missed my opportunity to buy Ravencoin after Bruce and Pepe called into the show, because wasn't that before the big jump on Binance?
Oh, that was way before. That was way before.
Yeah, I mean, I could have made a killing on this. I mean, my wife tells me I keep missing these opportunities. So I'm a little disappointed in myself, because I was joking around with Jason that day that I thought Bruce beat Jason in the conversation, that I was going to buy some Ravencoin and tuck it away just because of Bruce. Look, this is really easy. This isn't a question of if, it's a question of when. And when I say not a question of if, but a question of when, the SEC has limited resources. Do I think they're going to make Ravencoin the example? No, I don't. So I don't think Ravencoin in and of itself has any problems. Government regulators in the future being the target, I think they'll get encapsulated in whatever happens in a year or two. But I don't think that Ravencoin itself is going to be the target.
All right, sounds good. I have a follow-up on that, but let's get Sasha's thoughts on that, Bill's.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that. That it seems like the SEC is going after more low-hanging fruit, and Raven would probably fight back, and then they'd have to, litigate the matter rather than just giving them a fine and having someone say, "Oh, yeah, we don't want any problem. We'll pay the fine and let's move on." So, I think if they went after Raven, it would lead to, and I don't know that they could win that. Well, we'll see. It would be interesting, but and I guess I need to disclose. I've owned Raven since last February or something. So that might make me a little more bullish on it. But I think where Raven was mined rather than sold through an ICO, and this is where Jason and I disagree. I think that when you mine a coin, it takes it further away from the definition of an investment contract than if it's sold as an ICO. So I think that's the big difference there. But
Right,
this
no,
price spike is pretty telling that getting on an exchange creates the expectation of profit.
yeah, no, but we agreed on this show pretty much. Everyone was in agreement that Ravencoin itself is not a security. It's the promoters of Ravencoin and the centralized entities. There's clearly just two of them. The two centralized entities that are basically in charge of everything to do with Ravencoin other than the mining of the coin. So that goes back to David before we get Bill's thoughts in that. So I probably agree with you, David, that the SEC technically has unlimited resources, but limited, limited time and effort to deal with it. And Ravencoin clearly has the money now. The people behind Ravencoin clearly have the money, like the Ripple people, to defend themselves to the, to the highest bidder or the best bidder for the highest money, to clearly put up a fight against the SEC in this battle now that the price has pumped so much. And but the other question is, so I'm with you, David, that the SEC will probably not go after Ravencoin, but would you agree that if they wanted to, they can easily go after basically the two people in the white paper and the main entity in the back as well, which is T0?
So I just want to take one step back, because Sasha kind of said she agreed with me on something, but she didn't actually agree with what I was saying because I poorly articulated it. It's not that the SEC, Sasha was right when she said the SEC presently has only gone after the low-hanging fruit publicly. I believe in 2019, 2020, I've been saying 2020 lately, they're going to start going after the more confrontational crypto, whether it's going to be Ripple, whether it's going to be the ETH sale, they're going to go after some of the big targets. So my point was that I don't think Ravencoin in and of itself will be a big enough target when they actually go after the actual targets. So just to clear up that little point, I don't think this is an easy case. It's a mixed case. I do think it actually is a good test case if the SEC really wanted to go after them because of who their backers are, and some of their backers are some of the bigger names in the space, and how they handled this. And the simple proof is in the pudding that a lawyer who is involved wrote the letter, bam, they're on Binance, and bam, the price goes up. I mean, this is a picture perfect candle of what happens when you get onto an exchange. And don't get me started on Binance being a legit exchange, because you could have traded this elsewhere. But this is this would be not necessarily low-hanging fruit. There'd be a confrontation based on the mining, based on the sales after the mining, based on the promotion. So this isn't low-hanging fruit. They could pick the fight with Ravencoin. I just don't think they will. I don't think Ravencoin is big enough of a target for them to go after when they actually start going after real targets.
And then, so if they aren't a security, Tone's question about whether the promoters could get in trouble, I think they wouldn't have SEC jurisdiction if it's not a security. So by promoting this, it would be the same as like promoting a sneaker or something along those lines.
So I'm going to disagree a little bit on a couple of things here. First I want to say I really appreciate the I appreciate when entrepreneurs can find perceived loopholes in the laws and ways around the law to do something in a way that is not violative of legal rules. I think that if, we discuss this ad nauseum, but I think it's fairly clear that the way that Ravencoin was launched, it was not an investment contract. There's certainly arguments for that, and I know Jason would be here to advocate for it. I remember talking with him a little offline about it, and he said, well, all of the statements that were made, everything that was done on the code, all of the repositories on GitHub were all traced back to Medici, and I think it was Medici Ventures, which is a subsidiary of tZero. So really, this is completely a creation of tZero. Whether it's a security or not, I'm pretty sure. I feel pretty confident that it's not. However, we do know that Ravencoin was built on the Bitcoin infrastructure, right? And so we also know that the CFTC has considered Bitcoin to be a commodity, and so I think that it's fairly easy for us to conclude, or for the CFTC to conclude, that Ravencoin is a commodity. Now, normally the CFTC doesn't have jurisdiction over spot markets in commodities. It's only futures markets, swaps, things that deal with future delivery of a commodity. But under Section 9 of the Commodities Exchange Act, the CFTC can bring an enforcement action for false statements and market manipulation. So I think that while this is not something that the SEC would be concerned with, to the extent there are pump and dump, or there are other spoofing techniques or market manipulation techniques or false information that's being put out into the marketplace by, and I'm not saying that Bruce Fenton is involved or has made any of these, but to the extent him or others that are related to the project or not related to the project, I think that they could be putting a target on their back for CFTC enforcement actions. And that's all I have. And I'm going to take a drink of this delicious water.
Yeah, we are back on full screen. All right. Thanks, guys. I know we could spend another 5 hours talking about Ravencoin and Bruce Fenton, but we are going to move on. I took off screen share. Let me jump right back on it. And for our next topic, what we are looking at is news just broke. This wasn't on our original agenda, but it has been added to the agenda because the SEC charges EtherDelta founder with operating an unregistered exchange. Oh, and by the way, we are going to get back to Binance a little bit later, whether they are legit or isn't a legit exchange, to David Silver's point. Hope you're still around for that one. That's towards the end of the show or next week. But back to EtherDelta. There's a couple of things here, right? So I have two articles, the one from CCN and the one from CoinDesk. I just like the CCN page better. It's nicer looking. So here's the interesting thing. The U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission has charged the founder of decentralized Ethereum exchange DAX, EtherDelta, with operating an unregistered exchange. So so that's the one thing. So first of all, the SEC clearly doesn't care that you claim to be decentralized. And it's amazing how there is this concept of a decentralized exchange. It doesn't exist. If you are in charge, you are in charge. And the SEC basically said you are not decentralized. And all of the fools that thought EtherDelta was decentralized, the SEC just proved that they aren't. So that's number one. There's almost no such thing as a decentralized exchange because someone is in charge of the code and that person could be held responsible. The other part here is this one. According to the SEC, EtherDelta platform illegally allowed users to trade tokens that the SEC considered to be securities under federal law. Now, my biggest question after reading this entire article is, what are those tokens? Which tokens is the SEC clearly stated are securities? And this seems like a big ambiguity. Now, the CoinDesk article did state right here, almost all of the orders placed through EtherDelta platform were traded after the commission issued 2017 DAO report, which concluded that certain digital assets, such as the DAO token, were securities, and that platforms that offered trading of these digital asset securities should be subject to the SEC requirement that exchanges register or operate pursuant to an exemption. So basically, from what it sounds like to me, the only actual security that the SEC has said this token is a security is the DAO token, which when they said that no longer even existed. So to me, this is very, very frustrating because I want to know which tokens the SEC has said are securities that were traded on EtherDelta, and I haven't been able to find that part. But what do you guys think of this in general? And general thoughts? Let's start with Bill.
I think this is incredibly obvious that this type of enforcement action is coming. We have been, at least, to anyone who's been listening to this podcast, I think almost all of the attorneys here have been saying the SEC has their sights on unregistered exchanges. There is a tremendous amount of regulation that must be dealt with if you're going to be trading anything that constitutes a security. Now, we can probably pull up the press release here from the SEC. Probably one of you two are doing it, and it'll describe what tokens they were. It does say ERC20 tokens. So basically, to me, that means that they were ICO'd. So, we all know, I think a shorthand way to call something a security is that it was sold in an ICO in exchange for some sort of monetary consideration, or Bitcoin or ETH or something like that, right? So that's probably what they were trading. And anybody trading those needs to be either an exchange, which means they need to file rules and regulations and policy manuals and get approved by the SEC, or they need to be a broker-dealer registered with the SEC that has to comply with similar standards. So what's interesting to me is why this is not the first enforcement action. I think Bitfunder was, I think it was a couple of years ago, maybe in February, where that was the first exchange that was targeted by the SEC. But why this one? Because there's some really interesting features about it. We've got major exchanges in the US that are clearly selling, trading securities, ICO tokens. I won't name them because I don't want to get fingers pointed at me, but they're big companies, and they trade billions of dollars worth of tokens every day. Why did the SEC go after a small, I guess we could call it low-hanging fruit, decentralized exchange whose participants aren't really based in the United States? I don't know the answer to that. Maybe it's because it's easy. Maybe because they won't fight back. I think that wasn't this coupled by some sort of allegations of fraud?
I don't remember the whole detail, but I'm looking at the SEC website. I'm looking at the press release. It doesn't say which ERC20 tokens other than the DAO, which no longer exists at the time and hasn't existed for years.
I think that they were saying, look, you had notice of this because EtherDelta had noticed that this enforcement action was coming, because in July 2017, the SEC issued the DAO report. And in the DAO report, it said that any trading venue that was executing trades in these in something that could be considered a security had to register with the SEC. What's interesting to me about it is that I think the founder is in Malta, and anyway, they're all overseas, so no one's in the U.S. And I think this is the SEC saying, look, if you're going to be if your customers are going to be U.S. people, which was part of this enforcement action, then it really doesn't matter where you are. They will shut down the exchange, or they will hold you to account depending on whatever their prerogative is. So maybe they can't actually reach Zach Coburn, who is the founder of this, but they can seize assets. They can shut down the exchange. And I think this is the first of many. Anyone who runs a quote unquote exchange. You're not even allowed to use those words in the US if you're trading securities. Anyone who is operating an exchange in the US should really be crapping their pants unless they've registered as a broker dealer and got approval with the SEC, because this is the first of many, second of many.
Yeah, and I do advise people to read the SEC's Dow report. It was very interesting. And I'll put the link, I'll add the link to the video description, in that I remember calling the Dow. I got to find those videos. I remember calling it one of the dumbest projects that's going to steal all of your money the moment I heard about it. That was about 3 weeks before it imploded. And I always called them not only a security, but a VC fund security. And everyone said that it wasn't. And the Dow report stated that it was. So it was very interesting. All right, Sasha, let's get you in on this. Your thoughts on the whole ETH Delta. The concept of being a decentralized exchange has never made sense to me. And I'm still kind of upset that the SEC is going after these things. Like they're going after them rightfully so, but they're not justifying it with which securities are being traded, because they're not telling us which ERC20s and which ICOs are securities.
I think they have told us that in a number of different ways. They think everything that was sold through an ICO after the Dow notice that they gave that the Dow was a security, they think every ICO since then has been a security. That's my take on their perspective. And, it confused that line of messaging when Hinman came out and said Ethereum wasn't a security. But I think Ethereum's ICO took place before the Dow notice, which was July 25th, 2017. So I think every ICO after that is, in their opinion, a security. So every ERC20 token on there that was being sold that ICO'd post July 25th is probably what they're talking about. And I think that guy I thought I read somewhere that I always was under the impression that that was a decentralized exchange, in so much that I didn't know there was someone behind it. But I guess obviously someone wrote the code. They weren't anonymous. And I think that's one of the big problems with decentralized exchanges is how can you keep up an exchange, or what incentive do you have? Like this guy, I didn't realize that he was taking, I think, a 3 cents or 3%. There was some kind of, commission being made by this Chicago-based Zachary guy who's 31 years old. And he, if I'm remembering what I read properly, he was actually a licensed either SEC or CFTC broker. So he should have known the rules and knew that he was probably breaking them. But if he was taking a 3 cents or 3% off every trade, he's very well off now. So a $388,000 fine is just a small slap on the wrist to him. And someone, I think I saw in one chat too, that it's still open today. Like you can still go on and place trades on this thing. So it's like pay to play and keep going. If that's the case, if the SEC, like how can they actually shut it down? If it's still going after this happened today. But I think it's a good message to put out there to all of the other people who think they have decentralized exchanges, but there's someone behind each of them running it and operating it, maintaining the code. If that's the case, you're not decentralized. And then it's kind of a good, I don't want to say it's a good thing because, I overall don't like regulation, but it's created a really unfair playing field for people trying to create new projects in the space, trying to do the Reg D route. And then there's these other projects that are out there just, launching and going, as if there's no regulation. So now I think people are starting to really see, okay, we've got to, if this is it levels the playing field so that people can't just think they can operate outside the rules.
Yeah, well, one second, David. We'll get to you in a second. So, Sasha, yeah, he might be well off, but I'm sure you know how much guys that make this kind of money in crypto like to party. So it's a big question mark whether he has that $400,000 to pay the SEC. David, let's get over.
You're going to steal my line because you're that close to stealing my line. Because this is an offshoot of the Lamborghini rule. So the Lamborghini rule is if you do an ICO and you buy a Lamborghini the next day, you committed an SEC violation. This is an offshoot. If you're charging transaction fees, you're not decentralized if you're putting it to your bank account. And you're going to buy a Lamborghini. So I'm with Tone. This guy probably bought a Lamborghini because he thought he was decentralized and was making all that money. My presumption is this was, again, and this is what Sasha said before, low-hanging fruit. They negotiated this. He's paying the $400,000 to make this go away or whatever it was, 3 and change. So this was low-hanging fruit. They established some rules. Needs to be a big distinction on this, though. This is discussing token sales. So this isn't Coinbase, Kraken, Poloniex, Gemini. But there's something, a little tidbit in here that's really interesting. And the quote on this today was, and it was somewhere in the order, but it's basically saying a system that meets the requirements for the Exchange Act must register as an exchange. And that's what everyone in the crypto space should be terrified of. Because David Silver, just like Tone, is going to go back and say, read my first publication on CoinDesk. It's the exchange litigation that's coming. And all of these exchanges, and Coinbase did a fundraiser last week where they raised some extra money. I think they're worth $8 or $9 billion right now on paper. They should go pay me my $100 million to go away. But more importantly, everyone that's running an exchange should go register as an exchange. And that's who the SEC is going to be going after. So the low-hanging fruit here was this guy was just selling ERC-20 tokens. So I think that was really an easy way for them to go ahead and show that he was operating an unregistered exchange. The Coinbase, Kraken, Poloniex, Gemini, Bitrexes of the world, they're going to claim they weren't selling tokens so that they're exempt from this. But I think at the end of the day, this is the beginning. This is another low-hanging fruit for the SEC to declare martial law, and what they're going to declare the law is for 2020.
And so let's think about really what this implies. What does this mean? What is a crypto? And I can't use the word exchange. Remember, I can use the word exchange, but it's a legal term of art that means that you're registered and you're approved. But
bullshit. Hold on. Bullshit. Stop that. All of these places use the word exchange.
Use the word exchange.
No, but all of these places use the word exchange. You don't want to use it, but all of these places do.
No, exactly. They all use, or they'll say something like to get around it, like X, like Bittrex or something like that. Not to point the finger at them. But what does this mean? If they have to be registered, it creates all kinds of duties on these order execution venues, right? Particularly for the protection of the investors, not the investors, the traders. There has to be, because remember, all this happens in software order matching engines that match buyers and sellers. And it's, as I've said a million times on the show, it's a black box. So what goes on in those order matching engines has to be disclosed to the SEC so that investors can go look up these reports about how my exchange that I'm operating on, how that exchange operates, so that there's full disclosure of how my trades are going to be executed. There's best execution obligations. There's limits on the amount of commissions that they can charge. So there's often in crypto exchanges a very big differentials between the bid and the ask. Oftentimes the exchange can step in on one side of the trade and take the spread and capture the opportunity of the trade. There's a million different ways through bots or through being a market maker that the exchanges can step in here and what would you call it? Take the cream off the top of the trades. And all of that has to either be disclosed or mitigated against if it is actually something that's registered. So what we have now is we have these exchanges that are basically using very simple order matching software that would never comply with SEC regulations. And I think what we're going to see is that the order matching software for these exchanges is going to go to enterprise grade, the stuff that you can that we're seeing with the NYSE and the NASDAQ. These types of software trading platforms are going to make their way into crypto because the SEC is not going to allow these black boxes to continue to operate this way. It's not how markets are supposed to function in the 21st century.
I think we should all use a Jesse Powell quote here. Crypto traders don't mind market manipulation. Bullshit. They all mind it when they lose their money.
Did he really say that?
That is a direct quote. And on a blog post by him, after my lawsuit was filed, he literally posted that. It's in the Bloomberg article. They directly quote him on it when they did the Tether fraud. But that is a direct quote.
Man, CEOs in this space really should check with their lawyers before making any public statements or putting their fingers on a keyboard. And I like Jesse.
He doesn't like me.
I'm trying to get Jesse to play in the poker game.
Oh my God, please. He won't do it if I'm there though. And if you throw me out for Jesse, I'm gonna get really mad.
Oh hell no. No. Oh God, no. You're in the game. You might come off the front page of my website just so I can get him in there, but you're playing.
Marco, when Marco was still a coolie, Marco wouldn't speak on stage with me because he was offended by the fact that I kept saying that Marco is going to go to jail. I mean, I understand why he was offended.
Oh man, yeah. So, but if you are gonna play, I don't know if you registered yet, but I am gonna. Anyway, I'll need you to register. We'll talk about that later. Okay, we're gonna move on. I just have one quick comment. Unless you guys want to say anything else on Ether Delta, I just want to say that if there is a sudden Lambo up for sale in Chicago, you can certainly follow that sale because you know where that money is going and why it's going up for sale.
I do have one comment. Just so someone actually just texted this to me, but that you can actually download and run your own front end for Ether Delta. So the ruling is effectively worthless because anyone can set it up and trade any token regardless of it being listed or displayed on the front end.
Well, it's not I don't think it's totally worthless because it shows that whoever wrote that code. See, this is the problem with decentralized stuff, even something like Ethereum. In order for, unlike Satoshi and Bitcoin, who was actually able to do it anonymously as the grassroots movement, you can't get a project like this off the ground unless you personally promote it. And if you promote it and they know who wrote the code, they can go after that person. So sure, right now, people can't use this thing and there's nothing the SEC can do about it. But the next guy that tries to, do something like this is going to be a harsher penalty because of this precedent. So they're setting it up going forward, and I understand why they're doing it.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's move on, guys. And this one is actually, this is the one I really, really, really wanted to talk about. And this is, of course, the one broker situation. Oh, no, oh, sorry, that's Ether Delta again. Where's my one broker stuff? Here we go. Yes. So the SEC charges Bitcoin founded securities dealer and CEO. Now, I found this particularly interesting. I guess maybe I shouldn't say too much. I don't want to get a letter from the SEC. But so one broker has been around since 2012. I have never heard of a single person complaining about one broker. I never heard of a single person being scammed by one broker. And one broker had a pretty neat thing. One broker was allowing you. They were Bitcoin to Bitcoin only. Bitcoin goes in, Bitcoin goes out. But they went a little bit beyond what something like BitMax is doing, where you place total return swaps, TRS, bets on the future price of Bitcoin. They also allowed two individual people to place Bitcoin, I guess, swaps on like Apple stock or Amazon stock or gold or oil or the S&P 500. So if I think the S&P 500 is going to go up and you think the S&P 500 is going to go down, I would place one Bitcoin that is going to go up in a certain leverage or actually, I'm sorry, they were taking the other side of that bet. I'm sorry about that. They weren't peer-to-peer. One broker was taking the other side of the bet, which is one of the things that the SEC didn't like, is that one broker was always the counterparty, like a casino. You think Apple stock is going to go up, so you bet a Bitcoin on that with your leverage. One broker takes the opposite side of that bet. And if Apple stock goes up and you're right, you get paid out Bitcoin. If Apple stock goes down and you're wrong, you lose Bitcoin you put up for that swap contract. And the SEC went after them and shut them down. Now, there's a couple of interesting things here. So I don't know, I should have probably asked you guys to look into it before we did this show, in that once this thing shut down, people could not get their Bitcoin out. It happened suddenly. But then like 2 weeks later, they relaunched the website and were able to return all of the people their money. Like most exchanges in this case, and David is very familiar with Big Vern and Cryptsy, when the government comes down, you run away with the money. Now, one broker didn't do that. One broker, and I know this for a fact, let's not talk about why. I know this for a fact, that you were able to log on to it anonymously with your email, of course, because there was all anonymous accounts, and get your Bitcoin back. Was this something that the SEC allowed them to do, or was this something that other employees were able to do, just to be honest? So that's my one question, if you guys are aware of how that went down. And the whole thing was the SEC didn't like the fact that they were basically doing swap contracts on registered securities. And there's one more tweet here on this where, our Drew Hinkes pointed several things out. You can see from the SEC action, it was all about the KYC part and the securities part. But I was also very curious about this statement. For everyone too lazy to read the SEC report, this is in a nutshell why they got taken down: flagrantly allowing the trading of securities and dividend payments with zero effort for KYC. Now, this seems really strange that two dividends were paid out, 0.39 Bitcoin for a Coca-Cola dividend and 0.19 Bitcoin for Western Union, because this tweet from one broker seems recent, but that's a lot of Bitcoin for just a dividend payment. And so I guess they were holding the stocks. So I mean, the exchange, the one broker, they were probably the most responsible, the most honest project.
They were the most honest amongst the thieves?
Well, they didn't steal anything, right? That's the thing, right? I think they were, sure, they were brave. This is the problem, right? Like, hey, I'll let you jump in here, David. Well, like, this is like, I understand that, oh man, there's so many scammers here. These guys were not scammers, but they were clearly breaking like 8 different SEC and CFTC regulations.
I mean, I'm holding my head because we want to give them credit for not stealing money being a business. Yes, I agree with you. They apparently did not steal the money. But think about this in the context of a drug company testing a drug. You're saying if you can break all the laws when creating the drug, but as long as you have a product that works at the end, that's all that matters. No, here, they were not doing any KYC, AML. And the best reason I could say, and this is why I always say, especially with SECs, a lot of the companies today, and I say this about why I believe Ethereum, Vitalik, is working with the government already. He's working with the US. He's working with the Russian government, Armstrong and Coinbase and Gemini, the Winklevi. They're already working with the government. Eric Voorhees is working with the government. He knew this was coming out.
Of course he's working with.
What?
Yeah, he's definitely working with the government.
And he knew that he had to do the AML or KYC or he was going to go to jail. And Shapeshift didn't want to do it, but he knew this was coming down the pipeline. And he knew that if you don't do AML, KYC, and you're a US citizen and you're not surrendering your passport and you're going to stay in this country, you have to do AML, KYC on financial transactions. That's, to me, the big picture here. The fact that they were trading the securities is just kind of icing on the cake. They're trying to do something that's going to be legal and permissible in 2025. I think everyone on the show and everyone in the space agrees that in 2025, this is what we're moving towards. But one broker just didn't do it legally yet.
Anybody else want to jump in?
Well, I think this is a good example. I get so many clients always asking, well, what if we just, form our business overseas and, can we operate without worrying about the SEC? And this shows clearly, no, they have long reach into if you're selling anything to an American, you're within the SEC's jurisdiction through the Commerce Clause. So this gives a clear example of that being the case. And but I think it'll, how will they actually pull him into court here? Like, it's nice that he complied with everything and shut everything down. But if they want to actually lay charges, will the Austrian government force him to come to America to stand trial? Or I wonder how that will play out.
It's called extradition. Yes.
Bill, you want to jump in?
Yeah, there's a lot going on here. As we saw, there was a complaint by the SEC, there was a complaint by the CFTC, there were securities laws violations, there were Commodities Exchange Act violations, there was FinCEN regulations that were being violated. So just a potpourri of various regulatory agencies whose jurisdiction was implicated by this. And I think that despite being not a bad actor, there's laws. I mean, I'm an attorney who frankly doesn't like a lot of laws. I don't like a lot of regulation. I tweeted just the other day, I spent the afternoon at the DMV on election day, and we don't want the government to be in charge of everything. But when you get into the context of investments, we don't want a complete free-for-all with no regulation that's involved here. So I think the reason why this was dealt with was because there were multiple jurisdictions that were involved. I think this also shows something very interesting about the overlapping jurisdiction of the CFTC and the SEC with respect to crypto assets. So in this case, they were dealing with swaps, and a swap can be something that's under the CFTC's jurisdiction, and a swap is also, in certain circumstances, a security. So, when you're dealing with blockchain assets, you can really intersect with both of these regulatory regimes. And here's a couple examples where it might, come into play. So, for example, you might have an exchange that trades Bitcoin, which we know is a commodity, and it might trade ICO tokens, which we know are securities. So there's various different permutations of how someone in this space, a company operating in this space, could deal with both of these regulatory regimes at the same time. But there's a lot going on here. Another one is, and Sasha touched on this, the extraterritorial application of the U.S. securities laws. So it would involve it, and the interesting thing is, and this is a little bit different from what Sasha said, it can involve U.S. investors, which would give the SEC jurisdiction. But there was a Supreme Court case called the SEC versus Morrison. I think it was in 2010. What the Supreme Court said, and what cases that have interpreted that have said, is that to determine whether a transaction is within the SEC's jurisdiction depends on whether title transferred in the United States or not. And so that has caused courts to look at all different types of scenarios. One of them we dealt with in the Tezos case, which I can't go into a ton of detail about. But in that case, there was something that was very obvious. There was the website that hosted the ICO contributions was based out of Arizona. And, that was a very easy hook for a court to say that this is a US-based transaction. Another thing that courts have considered too, in the Tezos case considered, was that Bitcoin nodes and Ethereum nodes are located around the world, and they're also located in the United States. And it begs the question of if a blockchain transaction is consummated on a decentralized global network, where does it take place? Does it take place everywhere, or is it enough for the courts in the SEC in the United States to attach jurisdiction in the United States? And one of those factors, at least in the Tezos case, the court said the fact that there's nodes confirming the transactions in the United States supports the inference that this was a US-based transaction. So here, I don't know enough about how the SEC determined it had jurisdiction over people that were overseas, but based on what Sasha said and some of the things I said is probably what influenced the SEC's analysis.
And I think this should be a good lesson to, like, a lot of people look at things like the EOS ICO, where they said that they were blocking Americans, but anyone with an American VPN was still able to participate. And I don't have the link, but I read something in this case that said even trying to block Americans, basically it said you have to do more than just let them, block them with the VPN. And I guess that's where the KYC would come into play, because if you're asking for the KYC information, even if they have a VPN that says they're somewhere in Europe or, anywhere in the world, if you've KYC'd them and they have a native address in America, then you have the due diligence to follow the US laws in that case too.
All right, David, you want to jump back in here one last time?
I don't know this one particularly well, so I'm going to rely on what they said, because I don't think either of the people who were running this were US citizens, right? Like, the people running this were not that they pretended to be outside the US, they were actually outside.
Yeah, I
think
think
in Austria.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
they were in London or something like that.
But they weren't US citizens.
No.
Because like I said, I think there's distinctly different, and people need to understand this. When I meet someone and they tell me that they're living in Malta now, they're going to Puerto Rico, or they're going to Singapore, they're going to Thailand, until you surrender your passport, there are very different rules that apply. So in this particular case, because they were outside the US, the extradition, all that applies. What people in the US need to understand is, just because you put your business outside the US, if you're still here and you're accepting, those are very different things. So my warning to the people watching, just because you incorporate your company in Malta doesn't mean that you're safe and you can do anything you want, and don't think US jurisdiction is going to apply. Give up your passports and I'll have more respect for you.
Yeah, I think it's like, I just looked at this under Regulation S. There's the foreign issuer, and it's if more than 50% of your company's founders are from the US or living in the US at the time, then it doesn't matter where you're operating the business from, you're under US regulation.
Yeah, so, well, besides that, right, like the way I phrase it is, you're right, David, you're right. So if one of your C-level managers of your company, whether it's centralized or decentralized is irrelevant, is a US citizen, that's going to be a lot easier for the SEC to deal with, but they clearly don't care. I mean, if you break US regulations, they don't care if every one of your members is not an American citizen. Now, I think the only time it comes into play is when you are a citizen of and fully operating your project or your exchange in a country that the US is not going to go into. And the two examples I always give are Russia and China, and then we can add Iran, North Korea, other countries, right? So if you are a Chinese citizen and you are going to run an exchange, Binance, you really want to do it out of China, because then the US can't get you. But when you run it out of Malta, and we'll probably get to this later on, now the SEC could, I believe, go after you if they wanted to because of your Binance token, but we'll get to that as well. So in this particular case, so they were just, I think they were just breaking too many laws. KYC is probably the biggest one, but I think what made it easy for the SEC is the fact that they were offering, it's either TRS or CFD. They're very, very similar financial instruments. They're referring to it as CFD, which stands for credit for difference. It's almost identical to a TRS, total return swap. They are very similar financial instruments. Doesn't really matter how they named it, pretty much. And they were doing it on, and it even says it like right here. They were offering, oh, sorry, not this one, the other picture. They were offering the CFDs on things that were actually securities. And I think that played a huge role in it. And this brings me to something like BitMax, for example, or Deribit, to exchanges. I shouldn't call them exchanges, as because I absorb the information from like Bill. And that makes it interesting because we know that Bitcoin is not a security. But so offering a CFD on Bitcoin itself, like BitMax does, would not get them in this kind of trouble of offering a CFD on something that is not a security. So the SEC can't get involved. But they're also offering these CFDs using Bitcoin on Ripple and Ethereum and other cryptos. So if one of those cryptos, if say Ripple, if say Ethereum is deemed a security, then something like, I believe something like BitMax needs to immediately delist it from trading or register with the SEC and KYC all of their traders, because now they would be offering a CFD on top of a security that is deemed a security.
Another way to look at it too, Tone, is we can consider these things, even if they're not a security, if we can consider them a commodity, right? Like ETH or a Ripple token, and there are transactions being made on margin that would not clear within a certain time period, then that would implicate the CFTC's jurisdiction for contracts for future delivery. And I think I was reading in the context of something else just the other day that it's it might be a 28-day settlement period. But I think we've been focusing a lot on the SEC. I don't know, I'll be candid, I'm not as familiar with CFTC regulations in the Commodity Exchange Act. I'm really trying to get up to speed on this, but as we can see from these enforcement actions, the SEC may be saying, well, some of these things aren't securities, but the CFTC is working in concert with them to really cover their jurisdictional umbrella and bring everything within the scope. Because one of the things that the government is not going to do is to say, you got us, guys, these tokens, they fall within, the trading of these tokens fall within a legal black hole, and there's no laws that cover them. Guess you got us. Go have fun, buy your Lambos. That's just not going to happen. It's not.
Great point. Yeah.
All right, so I guess we can close out this topic. Oh yeah, sorry. So one last question. So what do you think this means for BitMax? Anyone can jump in here.
I think
I have an affiliate code that I pimp out all the time.
I think they're probably an unregistered exchange and going to get in trouble eventually.
Well, I mean,
if I had a Magic 8 Ball, I would say I don't even know what Magic 8 Balls say anymore. It's been a while, but exchanges, anybody who's exchanging these assets really needs to take a very hard look in the mirror, or else they're going to be on the end of an enforcement action. Or, this is something Sasha and I are dealing with is these exchanges. And I know David too. I mean, these exchanges are being sued repeatedly. There's some ways that we can get around the class action waivers and the arbitration clauses, but for the most part, they're bleeping the bleep up royally, and people are losing a lot of money. And there's a lot of arbitrations that are going on, and they're behind closed doors. David can probably say a lot more about that. But it's a big problem for anyone that is transacting with U.S. citizens, is affecting transactions through software or through hardware that's located in the United States, is settling transactions within the United States. or is located, but with a corporation or a person in the United States, really needs to take, I don't know how they're sleeping at night. Their legal teams certainly aren't sleeping well at night. I can tell you that.
What are you talking about? They're making millions. They're billing hourly, 18 hours a
Yeah,
day.
the legal team is sleeping just fine. They might be working all that, but they're sleeping just fine.
Trust me. Me and my adversaries aren't losing sleep over this. But I mean, Tony, I'm not really sure I understand your question. Your question is, should BitMEX be worried?
Yes.
The answer is the world's going to change when the SEC, there's going to be a day in 2020, and it's going to be like we've seen the government do. There's going to be the SEC, the CFTC, the DOJ, probably the FBI, probably, MI6, Interpol, FINMA, they're going to have a press conference in Washington, D.C., and they're going to descend upon the crypto world where all of today's heroes are tomorrow's villains, and they're going to say, so-and-so has been indicted, we do a global raid, X, Y, and Z are in jail, here's what we're doing. And which exchanges stay and maintain are going to be the exchanges that we're working with the regulators. Governments aren't going away before 2025. I'm sure everyone that follows the show and is going to be commenting, they're going to say horrible things about me, but I can promise you this, we're going to vote for the president in 2020 and 2024. I can tell you that for sure in the US.
And do you think they could just be gearing up to make an exchange that's safe enough, in their opinion, to host an ETF?
Well, despite what CNBC calls me, and they only call me a crypto critic, I am not a crypto critic. I do believe that in 5-10 years, there will be an ETF and everything. But no, how can you have an ETF when the exchanges are an unregulated market right now? They're not going to allow, pricing from a bunch of these exchanges that themselves tolerate spoofing, whitewashing, fraud. So it's not today, but I do believe that we're going to get clarity. I forget who I was making fun of when it was the CFTC or the FTC. They said we're going to get clear English regulations. Sure we are. So I think at the end of the day, it's coming. Come on, we're like year 2.5 of this right now. Think of where the internet was. You were logging in through Mosaic probably. Well, Sasha wasn't born yet. Restis, I'm guessing you're under 40.
I moisturize.
I remember in 1995 logging into ESPN, and there was one picture of on ESPN, and it took about 6 minutes for that picture to load. That's where we are here.
You're lying, Dave. We both know it wasn't ESPN to load that picture for an hour. Because I was there as well in like 96 trying to load pictures.
Exactly. That picture took like 35 minutes. But the point being,
that picture too. I can name some names.
Exactly. Netscape, was the predominant browser, Mosaic. I just think that it's coming. It's just not coming as quickly as some of the millennials would like it.
And we got to be careful. I think you're right, David. We need to be careful that we don't take new technologies and put them in an old box. I think one of the things that's really unfortunate for me is, and we all say this, we don't want to stifle innovation. This is an incredibly transformative technology, and there's a lot of really amazing use cases for it. But at the same time, when you're dealing, the problem with, and I don't want to say crypto in general, but everybody wants to, who has a project, they want to attach their own token to it. And they want to get in on the ICO, this ICO craze that happened in 2016 and 2017, where a bunch of people made a shitload of money, and this model is really having a hard time dying. And the tokenomics of these things really, it puts, by including a token that everybody wants to put on an exchange as soon as they create their project. It takes it from, this concept that everybody used to talk about from a utility token or some kind of a product, and it makes it an investment, and it makes it something that is dealt with in the context of traditional capital markets. And you know, it's just, we can't escape that. And so unless we try to change tokenomics and stop trying to put, you know, a token on every new crypto project, then we're going to be dealing with the CFTC. We're going to be dealing with the SEC. And maybe the space needs to take a really hard look at how they monetize their projects. And it doesn't need to be with some other bullshit coupon token. And I'm sorry to all the people that I represent who or want me to represent them who have, you know, different ideas about this. But, you know, let's move beyond the attach a token to my blockchain project model into something that gets us, you know, into real innovation and not financial markets.
Yeah, no, I agree with that, Bill. Okay, so I do want to move on. I was gonna also talk about the global reach of the US government. We briefly mentioned it. Maybe I'll save that for the end if there's still time. Otherwise, we'll definitely get to it next week because I want to talk about it in terms of Binance and maybe a little, I mean, I don't really want to talk about BitMax. I'm hoping that exchange sticks around as long as possible for selfish reasons. But I just want to comment on David's point when he said, are the regulators gearing up for a Bitcoin ETF and they need a registered, you know, a compliant exchange? And this is the chicken and egg problem. I'm sure the regulators would be okay with launching a Bitcoin ETF if they had a handle on the underlying, you know, regulation of Bitcoin's price discovery. The problem is the most compliant exchanges, like, you know, Gemini with Winklevi and maybe even Coinbase and the upcoming Bakkt exchange. The problem is no one trades there because all of price discovery happens in the uncompliant exchanges. And that's their chicken and egg problem. Like they would need to make sure that 90% of Bitcoin's price discovery takes place on fully compliant and regulated exchanges before they can consider an ETF.
Well, and they also need to create demand, right? So just listing, you know, so there's a buy side and there's a sell side when you're dealing with secondary markets, right? So just putting, you know, an order matching engine up on a regulated broker dealer is not going to, or an exchange that's regulated with the SEC is not going to suddenly cause trading to happen. You need to create incentive structures within that's either going to attract market makers, which take the other side of the trade, or you know, have some sort of ability to create markets, because they don't just happen spontaneously. You need to prime the pump, and you need to fill them with actors that will trade against each other. And if you don't provide liquidity, then, and I think that's probably what's happening, is there's no liquidity on these exchanges.
Well, I think the regulators and the larger US-based exchanges that are working with the regulators, what they're doing is they're waiting as institutional money comes in. There's going to be the need for the institutional money, and the regulations are going to come hand in hand, and they'll fund it themselves once there's clarity. And the only way Coinbase can have a valuation of $8 or $9 billion is if institutional money is coming into that. And with institutional money comes government control. So people can blame me. I don't have institutional money, so I'm not dictating what those rules are going to be, but the institutions themselves are. I mean, it's ironic that we're all, you know, with everything that's happening here is all these anarchists and libertarians are inviting the banks back in to do everything again. So
sadly, it's true.
Right. And that's my point. My point is, like, so many people are investing in Bakkt and Coinbase and all this stuff, and they wouldn't be doing it unless they had a handle on eliminating the uncompliant exchanges. Because what's the point of putting in hundreds of millions of dollars into Coinbase, Gemini, and Bakkt if no one trades there? So you have to force trading onto regulated exchanges by cracking down on the unregulated ones, because otherwise everyone will still trade with, you know, Bitfinex and Bitstamp or local Bitcoins, like
Well,
price
but I think
discovery in those exchanges.
But I think your use of the word everybody is misleading because it's not that everybody, it's the people without money will be trading there. The institutional money will be trading. So it's like, I'll use my BitConnect case. Yeah, I speak to 100 people a week, but most of those people lost between $100 and $500. There are people who lost, $10 million. Those people are going to be trading on the regulated exchanges. The people you see on Twitter who tell me I'm crazy and want to say mean things to me on Twitter, those are the people with $100, $500 in. I say when I got threatened and someone called me up and threatened me after the Tezos lawsuit got filed. It was a kid who put $1,000 into Tezos that required SWAT going into his parents' house and getting, the police, the FBI, and SWAT involved because they threatened me, my family, and said they were going to do something to us. So for that kid's $1,000 investment, God only knows what the government had to pay to go arrest this kid for that. But that's the kid who's.
Can we back this up? I don't know. Wait, so some kid threatened you.
Some kid who invested in Tezos.
You did an investigation to find out who it was. You didn't know.
I called the police, the FBI. I mean, called me up, knew where I lived, had my personal information. No, I went straight to the government. I like the government. But I mean, for this kid who has $1,000, that's who's going to be trading on the unregulated exchanges, not the people who are doing the institutional money. The institutional money is going to the legit places.
Well, that's my point has been the institutional money is not going to legit places because the institutional money still doesn't give a shit about Bitcoin.
But I disagree with you. If Coinbase has a $9 billion or an $8 billion valuation, and there's institutional money that's starting to come in, and those players, and I agree with you, Tone, the space is going to consolidate with the real money coming in to regulated exchanges. It's the only way it can work.
No, I know. I agree with you. I think we do agree, you and I, that Coinbase is grossly overvalued, right?
Well,
you probably don't because you want to get paid.
Dude, I'm just saying, if you're worth $9 billion, cut me a check. But yes, I mean, the only way that Coinbase isn't grossly overvalued is if there's institutional money and the tokenization of securities, and the tokenization of securities is coming.
Right, but we haven't seen that yet. We haven't seen all we've seen is talk about institutional money trading. We haven't actually seen it yet. So maybe it's coming, but I will wait till I see it.
But Main Street's the last people to hear. By the time we hear, Goldman Sachs has already bought it up, paid for it, and changed the law. Look for the law to change, and then we'll know it's already happened.
No, I agree with you because look, it's all talking about how Goldman Sachs now owns Poloniex, right? Because of this quasi chain.
That's so not true.
I know. I agree with you.
What about Bakkt?
Where do they fit?
What about Bakkt? Aren't they? They're like a huge investment bank, right? Or like the New York Stock Exchange or something.
Right. So Bakkt is basically an initiative to create a Bitcoin trading operation by ICE, and ICE owns the New York Stock Exchange. So basically, so ICE is the parent company, and they run the New York Stock Exchange, and they are starting a Bakkt initiative. But Bakkt is, again, I haven't seen any difference between Bakkt and Coinbase. It's just another exchange. Like Coinbase, which is a quasi-broker, quasi-exchange. I haven't seen too many details. People are hyping this thing up out of proportion. I don't see a difference between Bakkt and Gemini or Coinbase or any other exchange trying to be fully compliant with the US government, or the global government on exchange regulation, other than because it is being run by the ICE, people think that it's going to bring in more institutional traders, but those traders still need to come. And my other question is, something like Gemini and Coinbase have proven over the years to be very good at Bitcoin security. ICE is new. So yeah, it might be great that they have the the regulation part all set, and they have experience in matching orders, but you have to trust them to get Bitcoin security right. Because what if the next headline we see next year, Bakkt is hacked?
Mm-hmm. And what if everyone trusts them to give the institutional money there because of the affiliation with ICE? Everyone maybe think, like all the people that aren't into crypto now think that that's a way, down the road that investment advisors can access the space. And then if they get the security wrong, I think the best bet is that someone like Coinbase or Gemini, get more, like if they are going to have an ETF or something like that, that it go with one of those two. And I think they are trying to get these like better security. I saw something that Coinbase was getting storage, or they were getting a bigger storage, something going on with that.
Right. I mean, so we will see. We will see how that goes, because look, everyone is so hyped about Bakkt. Let's say Bakkt launches on January 1st. I mean, I think it'll take Bakkt several years before they are trusted as a Bitcoin storage mechanism. Like, don't get hacked for 2 years. So I don't see any institutional volume going in anytime soon because of that model. And this is another reason why I don't see the ETF coming anytime soon, because after the SEC gets a handle on the underlying price discovery, they then need to get a handle on Bitcoin security storage. So I don't see the ETF coming anytime soon. All right, guys. Unless there's any final follow-ups on that, I do want to move on to the lawsuit between, speaking of the Winklevi twins and Gemini, I want to move on to the lawsuit that they filed against Charlie Shrem. And this is really, really interesting. So this article is in the video description, and I'm not doing screen share. Let me do that real quick. Here we go.
I'm going to dip out before this next topic. Everybody, it's been a pleasure. I have to meet a client in a few minutes because I'm still on the West Coast. We're still doing business. And everybody have a great night. It's been a pleasure. I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks,
Bill.
Yeah, this is gonna be my last one. I have to go put my kids to bed because my wife decided I'm home and therefore she could leave. So the fact they haven't interrupted yet. So this is my last one. It's gonna be my favorite one.
That's great. And you know what? We'll probably save the rest for next week. I want to do the show again next week, same time. And we'll save the rest of the topics for there, because I don't think we have, I don't think the rest are as big a deal. So, well, not that, actually, I don't think this is a big deal. It's only a big deal because of the names involved. That's what makes it a big deal. It's because it's the Winklevi twins and it's Charlie Shrem. Otherwise, this would be almost nothing. So this is an old article from 2016 that kind of explains like the whole story of Charlie. But we're gonna jump. Oh wait, so that's the wrong screen share. Then sorry guys. Let me. What I want to do now is share the actual court case. So I'm just gonna, I'll share this. Not gonna go to my desktop. So this is the actual court case. It was unsealed this week, and the Winklevoss Capital Fund versus Charlie Shrem, and this gets a little bit interesting. So they are suing him for 5,000 Bitcoin. And that's because between September 2012 and February 2013, the Winklevi sent him $750,000 to purchase Bitcoin on their behalf. And they're specifically pointing to the first batch of that money being $250,000 that they sent to Shrem between September and October of 2012. And they're saying Shrem only accounted for $189,000 worth of Bitcoin. So $61,000 was the shortfall. And if you estimate the price of Bitcoin at that time, that comes out to about 5,000 Bitcoin during that time. And what they're saying is he shorted them 5,000 Bitcoin. And after doing a bunch of analysis and working with blockchain analysis and people talk too much, and Shrem posted some of his Bitcoin public keys on the internet, and there was done an analysis. And around that time period, Charlie Shrem moved approximately $5,000 to his own public key, and that allowed Winklevoss to say, hey, he actually did buy Bitcoin with our money during that time span, but he sent it to himself instead. And then I would have thought that the government had taken all of his Bitcoin when he went away in 2014 or 15, but he may still have it. So there's lots of questions to be asked here. I guess let me get your general views on it. I have like so many follow-up questions on this. Let's get your general views. David, you go first.
I love this lawsuit. This is like, the two early adopters going battling it out, and shows everything that they say Bitcoin should have stopped and the blockchain should have stopped. You have the exact problem from, two early adopters. This is great. The only thing that upsets me, and I tweeted the Winklevi when this got unsealed, I can't believe they didn't hire me to do this, that they hired Nelson Mullen and paying them hourly. I would have totally done this for shits and giggles. I mean, this is great. And by shits and giggles, I would have taken like 5 million, of what they're going to get. So this is what's incredibly interesting here is that despite what Shrem's going to say, the court must have agreed with the Winklevi and allowed them under seal to lock up some of his assets. Now, I do this a lot nowadays when my clients lose their crypto. I go out to all the major exchanges in the US. I try and get accounts locked up, and I haven't been quite successful at it because by the time I get court orders to do these things, the bad guys move the money. So it's pretty incredible, the lawsuit, what they're claiming. But what is this? It's basic fraud. I mean, there's nothing to it. They're claiming Shrem, used money to buy shit for himself and live a lifestyle. But from that perspective, this is just, it's humorous, but it's no different than any other business deal gone bad.
Hey, David, no, I got so many follow-ups for you because I don't know how long I'm going to have you, and then we'll have Sasha follow up. So wait a minute. When you just said something that's weird to me, right? You're saying that the court allowed some kind of a freeze, but you can't freeze Bitcoin. What do you mean by that? Explain.
So right now, the U.S. exchanges, if you send them a restraining order, they will actually freeze people's accounts fairly quickly nowadays, within almost minutes to hours. So someone let's assume that Shrem was holding I haven't read the paperwork. My understanding is it's in the paperwork somewhere, which accounts of his they were able to lock up. But let's just assume, and this is an example, I'm not saying this is true. He held, 10,000 Bitcoin at Coinbase for some reason. If you get a court order, Coinbase will freeze his account. This is what some of the people complain about centralized exchanges. So if whatever exchange he got caught holding some of this crypto at, those exchanges froze his accounts there, and the Winklevi were able to get the money out of those accounts for their benefit.
Well, but that's the thing, right? Like, how do we know that Shrem was holding that Bitcoin at an exchange?
So typically, and I'll just use my example, we shoot the darts at every exchange and hope to get lucky.
Oh, no. My question is, are you assuming that this happened, or because I skimmed through the court report, and I didn't see the part where that stated that Shrem is still like, I don't even know if Shrem still has the 5,000 Bitcoin. As far as I know, Shrem spent it when he got confiscated when he got arrested.
They got a pre-judgment attachment order, and in the pre-judgment attachment order, they were able to go after assets if they knew where they were. And he was holding, it wasn't near the 5,000. It may have only been 5 Bitcoin. So I don't know what they actually attached on the order.
I was under the impression that the government took all of Shrem's money. No. And that he was broke. Because I assume that, sorry, Charlie, if that's wrong, but based on some of the projects that he was getting involved in, it really seemed like didn't exactly have 5,000 Bitcoin in the bank.
No, yeah, but again, this is the prejudgment attachment. You have to be able, there's a high threshold to get that. Normally, just because I file a lawsuit, I don't get to go freeze people's bank accounts. So by the time I normally get a judgment, the bad people have moved the money away. The fact that the Winklevi got the prejudgment order is pretty incredible, but they found some things. It wasn't nearly what they claimed to be owed, though.
What I read in it was
Yeah, sorry.
that Shrem put 5,000 Bitcoin in some vanity address and posted about
Yes.
it in 2012, like on a Bitcoin forum. So then they had a forensic accountant go through all of his history. So maybe they didn't have that kind of accounting service, the government, at the time of the first lawsuit, but now they're able to look into blockchain transactions with more efficiency than they could a few years ago. Maybe that's what happened.
Well, but these are two different things that we're talking about. Sasha's
Yes.
completely correct. They now have the ability to basically unwind from the genesis to where any Bitcoin has gone. But what we're discussing on the prejudgment attachment is that on the prejudgment attachment today, Shrem was holding assets in certain places. The Winklevi were able to attach to those assets where they were today. Those don't have to be the same two assets that you're attaching.
Mhm.
Think of it this way: if you steal my car, and my car is worth $10, and you have $10 in the bank, I can freeze the $10 in the bank if I get a prejudgment order, even though those two things are different.
All right, so oh man, there's so many questions on this. So, here's the thing, right? So, oh man, I don't even know where to start. Hold on, let me get back to that table of how much money they sent. And all of this, all of this evidence is now public, which is absolutely amazing. So here is the list of the money that they sent them, right? So we're talking about the 2012 stuff. So they're saying he shorted them on the first, so on these, so you see these $50,000 transactions, and this is the one that seems to be missing, like this $50,000 one, the DNA stuff. And so my first question is, if Charlie Shrem shorted them 5,000 Bitcoin in 2012, why did they send him another $500,000 to buy them Bitcoin in 2013? Can somebody answer that for me, please?
You know, for a variety of reasons, you're assuming they had this spreadsheet which showed them getting shorted the Bitcoin. This was my guess, created after the fact by Charlie Shrem, according to this document. But you don't know that this was you don't know that this document was prepared contemporaneously with that.
Yeah, no, okay, so basically, so Shrem was actually, but that's the thing, right? Like, was Shrem gonna hold all that Bitcoin for them, or was he actually sending it to them? So I know this was 2012, and the Winklevi twins were probably very new to it. So my best guess is, like, Shrem was gonna hold on to the Bitcoin for them, but BitInstant's operation was that he was gonna send you the Bitcoin. So this seems this seems like kind of bad on the part of the Winklevi twins. In that, and look, I've never met the Winklevi twins. I've hung out with Charlie many times. Charlie, don't get mad at me. I still like you, Charlie. I hope you play in my poker tournament because we already discussed it. So I'm just really curious about the case. And so, like, they should have been sending the Bitcoin to Winklevi because BitInstant wasn't a Bitcoin storage facility. It was a way for you to buy Bitcoin, and they sent it to you. But I'm assuming that the Winklevi twins were also investors, along with Roger Ver, in BitInstant, and I guess they felt comfortable with Charlie being their Bitcoin storage. And probably because of this incident, the Winklevi twins have come up with a very good Bitcoin storage solution. So probably this doesn't happen to them. So that's my first initial question.
Well, let's go back, because this is, 2012, and I'm going back to when I got my first couple of Bitcoin that someone gave to me when prices were around this price. I didn't know I to this day don't even remember where the person sent those first Bitcoin, but there was some issue and then he moved them to Coinbase. But you're looking at guys who saw the value and put in real money at the beginning. They may have just been sitting there saying, Charlie, we trust you. You're our boy. I don't think that there was, they weren't building Gemini when this was going on.
Right. No, and I agree with that. Because I bought my first Bitcoin actually after this date. So they were definitely in before me. I bought my first ones about 2 months later. It was on the Cyprus bubble. So if only I got in 6 months earlier, I would have been in right here at like $12.
I must have been in like a little later in 13, I guess, because mine were like $200 a pop.
Yeah, so were mine. It was the same thing. It was like April.
Yeah.
Or got in 2013, they were 200 again. Anyway, so my other, now this is great. I can't wait to get your thoughts on this. At the very end, I was almost like borderline laughing at this. It's great. You can try, but good luck. I'm trying to find it in the court document where they actually want, if they can't get the 5,000 Bitcoin, they want the dollar amount of the highest price between the existence of Bitcoin and the payout. So they're actually demanding, and all of the fees, all of their lawyer fees, all of the filing fees, they've probably been at this for about 3 years trying to get, so they're actually looking for, man, I should have highlighted it somehow.
But okay, so there's a difference between asking for something and getting something.
Yeah.
So here's what I would say to that. So far, what we've seen between the government and the private actions is you get the price that it is today, not the price at the peak. So let's just assume they win, they would get 5,000 times whatever the price of Bitcoin is today. And then they'd have to assume that Charlie could pay for it. I can't imagine they have a contract that would allow for attorney's fees, that they did this on a handshake, but I could be wrong again. Someone sent this to me. I actually haven't read most of it yet. I've only skimmed through it. But look, the whole point of this is Shrimp. I don't think there's one of us. By the way, Charlie, that picture that Tone put up of you, that shows he's a good friend of you because you don't look like that anymore. So that's a good friend. But the asking for, my presumption is, let's just assume the Winklevi win. The Winklevi win here, the 5,000 Bitcoin plus pre and post judgment interest, not the value at the peak. They'll be getting 5,000 times, I don't know, what's Bitcoin trading at today?
6,500. I haven't checked the price. People in the chat are saying it's dropping, but I'm too busy, so I have no idea.
So
you can see that I'm busy. People are like, why isn't Tone trading? I'm like, can't you see me on video talking about law? Like, this is why Tone isn't trading.
So again, I think that's where they came up with the 33 million. Like someone said it was only 30 million. So that's why I thought that's what they asked for. But that's why the case is worth 30 million bucks. Which is why they didn't want to give me my 40% contingency fee. And they hired a fancy firm to do it hourly. I'll bet they're getting 100 grand a month for this case.
Yeah, it's a lot, but yeah. So, oh man, because I read this whole thing last night, and yeah, so they want the highest price. Now I thought that, like the way the Mt. Gox thing went down. David, you just said that it's the price today. I thought it was the price at the time. So if
Mt. Gox, Cryptsy was the same way. Cryptsy was the price when it closed, and the litigation started. Mt. Gox, and they're fighting this again because in theory there's more money in Mt. Gox now than if you pay the prices back then. That's part of the problem on the distribution. So I'll use Cryptsy for the instance. When Cryptsy closed, the price was like 500 a Bitcoin, so that's what the valuation was on. Because lawsuits aren't about being an insurance policy for going up and down. So during the litigation, during Cryptsy, the price went up to $20,000. People are like, oh my God, I want my $20,000. But if the price had gone to zero, you wouldn't have been like, well, now I'll take my $500. the reasoning and the rationale between why you can get, and this is the big fight. Look, even in this lawsuit, is Bitcoin property? Is it a commodity? Is it a security? Because if Bitcoin is a property, you can just get back the 5,000 Bitcoin, which they would happily take right now as the 5,000 Bitcoin. But here's the problem. Even if they've located it, you know this better than anybody, even if they located it in a wallet in Malta right now, without the private key, they ain't worth shit.
Yes.
My 11,000 Bitcoin from Cryptsy.
You know this very well with Cryptsy.
I have 11,000 Bitcoin. Everyone on the chat right now, I will give you 2,000 Bitcoin if you hack in my 11,000. This is where I actually think Tony and I got our first fight. I wanted someone to be named Bitcoin Jesus so I can get my 11,000 Bitcoin back. Your argument was, if that happens, it goes to zero.
Yeah, you don't have, you are awarded a wallet with 11,000 Bitcoin, but you don't have the private key.
Completely worthless. My entire life would change if I got those access to those 11,000 Bitcoin. But that goes back to, you know, what they're asking for versus what they would win. Let's assume they win. What they win is the 5,000 Bitcoin and pre and post judgment interest at this point, 30 million bucks.
All right, so I got this on the full screen because I found the page.
Wait, why would they get interest if they're getting the Bitcoin back?
Because where people want like the higher value, you're still entitled in the lawsuit on your damages to get pre and post judgment interest from when you didn't have it in your possession.
Okay.
No, it's no difference than regular litigation.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it makes sense on like on anything else, but on Bitcoin, it would seem funny to give them the interest over all that time. And how would they calculate it? Just at the regular rate?
It's the calculated court rate. So
mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean the Winklevi, like they're asking for the moon because look, clearly they got defrauded for $61,000, but at the time that was 5,000 Bitcoin. But look what they're asking for. I found the page for an award of compensatory. I can't pronounce that word. Damages.
Compensatory damages. It's okay. You can probably say it in Russian. People want to hear you speak Russian today for some reason.
Yeah, apparently, yeah. In an amount, because this is also going to the audio podcast, that's why I want to read it. For an award on compensatory, I can't even pronounce that.
Compensatory,
thank you. For an award of compensatory damages from defendant, which is Charlie, in an amount to be proven at trial, open parentheses, calculated as the highest intermediate value of 5,000 Bitcoin between the time of the wrongdoing and the time of trial, or as otherwise calculated in accordance with the court's instructions, issued in the U.S. securities, U.S. jurisdiction. So basically, if this goes to trial in 3 years and one Bitcoin is $100,000, they want 100,000 times 5,000.
I'll use, I can only talk about the publicly filed Kraken complaint in federal court. But think about that case. May 7th, 2017, ETH's trading at 90. ETH runs up to 1,200 bucks in ETH, is now back to 200. What are my clients entitled to when we go to trial? 90. I'm going to argue, I'm with the Winklevi. I want 1,200 in ETH. That means that the 8 million they lost that day, which is worth 16 million in present value, is worth $150 million. I'm with the Winklevi on this one.
And sorry to keep bringing this interest thing up, but what number are they going to calculate the interest on the highest price ever, or will they take a daily average over the span of the year?
It's whatever the award is.
Okay, whatever the cash award is.
Whatever the cash value of the award is. The Monkey Capital case, we did it also. It was cash value plus pre and post judgment interest. The CFTC or I forget who did the New York case. Recently they did the same thing. It was on present value.
Okay.
Which is where I think we're headed. You're going to get, the argument is that you get present value because you want your 5,000 Bitcoin back, and they're going to give you the present value so you can go buy 5,000 Bitcoin, because they're seeing it, the courts are almost seeing it as property, and you should be, it's like your car. You are allowed to get They have to give you enough money to buy your car back. So they'll give them enough money, the 30 million, to buy the Bitcoin back.
But
I really don't think Shrem has the money for 5,000 Bitcoin right now. I personally don't. So they're also asking, like we said, for other stuff, punitive damages. They're asking for interest on all that Bitcoin over the 5-year span, attorney fees, pre-judgment, post-judgment. That's the interest, and other stuff that they think the court will.
So scroll down a second. Show me who signed this.
You're gonna Google them?
Yeah.
All right, go for it. So, okay, so if I was Charlie, and correct me if I'm wrong here, if this was me, if I was in Charlie's shoes, I would try to counter offer $61,000 plus, well, I want to say plus attorney fees, but 3 years of attorney fees from the Winklevi, that could be like $3 million. Because it's going to be hard to prove that Charlie still has the 5,000 Bitcoin. And even if they could prove that Charlie has that, because I have no idea. I really need to talk to, I kind of wish Jason was here because Jason might know because he was involved in the Trend on Shavers case. And I know the Trend on Shavers.
I was involved in the Trend on Shavers case too. It's the first time you ever met me. You told me you called me mean names.
Yeah, that's right. You were. But he was in the first. You're right. My bad, David. I forgot who actually put Trend on away. And now you're working on putting another Trend on away from the BitConnect case. So I guess it's like trend ons for you. So look, in the Trend on Shavers case, every single penny of his Bitcoin was confiscated by the government. True.
Yes. Well, right. But most of it was missing at that point. But yes.
Right, but whatever he had left was confiscated by the government.
I believe so, but that's a Jason question. Jason.
Jason's already answered that question, and the answer is yes.
I just don't remember, so I'm with you. I believe the answer. Yes.
I remember very well. It was on another interview, like with Jason and Shavers. They specifically stated that every single Satoshi of Trend on Shavers has been accounted for and handed over to the U.S. government. But so in Charlie's case, I wonder how much of Charlie's Bitcoin was taken by the U.S. government, and if Charlie still had any Bitcoin when he was getting out of prison. Now, if Charlie made a deal with the government to hand over, like his Bitcoin, but didn't, this is a big problem for him. Now, I have no idea. I have no idea how that case went. I'm just guessing here. But if Charlie still has, if they can trace the public keys and they can say, we are 99.9% sure these are Charlie Shrem's public keys, and he still has access to this Bitcoin, you can't actually prove that Charlie still has the private key if that Bitcoin has not moved in a long time. So I think it's going to be very difficult to prove for them that Charlie can actually pay them back. And if I was Charlie, I would claim as such, though then you're almost like losing that Bitcoin. You won't be able to touch it for 50 years till people start, dying of old age and forget about this.
Apparently, Tone, someone just said in the chat.
If you're going to claim that you no longer have access to those public keys.
Someone just said they lifted the freeze on Charlie's assets like a few minutes ago. CoinDesk published it. But I remember seeing Airbnb ads for like quite a nice mansion in Sarasota that he had just purchased. And I think he has some nice cars as well. So maybe he sold his Bitcoin and bought real property.
Oh, that's interesting.
But Tone, you're talking about two different things here. Let's clear this up first. Okay, you're talking about collectability versus liability. Liability and collectability have nothing to do with each other.
Go on.
That's just the fact. There's no discussion. I spend my entire life on cases that liability is a slam dunk, collectability is a question. So what you're arguing is that the collectability on Shrem is possibly not there, just like Big Vern is in China with the private keys and saying, maybe one day I'll move the money. We'll see what happens.
Yes. That's exactly
yeah.
it. That's exactly
I
it. Like,
agree with you.
I think collectability by the Winklevoss from Charlie is going to be very, very difficult. But if, Charlie did buy a mansion and a bunch of cars, that could be the confiscatability part, because those are not exactly private key assets that are, sitting somewhere.
They can attach a lien on the property.
Here's the answer, by the way. They got a court order to freeze assets at Zappo, Coinbase, Poloniex, and Bittrex up to 5,000 Bitcoins. Not that there was that much there. According to Circle, for Poloniex, there was less than half a Bitcoin.
Right. Well,
Yeah, but what's he got on a Trezor? We'll never know.
Exactly.
I guess the forensic accountant can figure that out too.
Actually, like according to Circle, there was only 40 cents there, actually, because I saw this
40
as well.
cents or 40. Well, it says 41 in Bitcoin. It says $41 in Bitcoin. So is that 41 cents or is that 0.4 Bitcoin?
No, that's 41 cents.
I think that's a typo. I mean, I think it's 0.41 Bitcoin.
No. It says 0. No, look at my screen, David.
I'm looking.
It says 0.000642.
Oh, you're looking at the Garnaschee statement. Yes.
Yeah. I'm looking at this one.
I'm looking at the CoinDesk article.
Oh, okay.
Bittrex held roughly $4.40. So this is why they lifted the stay, because there was like $5. Because there's $4.41 at Bittrex. So this is probably why they lifted the stay. There was less than like 10, 20 bucks that they had thousands of dollars of lawyer hours and the judge.
Right. So how much of so there's no money in there. Oh, there's the 41 cents again.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's the 41 cents, the $4.44.
Oh shit! They got Judge Rykoff?
Yeah. It's an important first step towards his vindication that all of the money is missing. I love Brian Klein.
Oh wait, he hired Brian Klein as his defense attorney?
Yeah, Brian Klein's. So let me tell you, if you can afford Brian Klein, you have money.
Oh, no, Brian Klein is a good defense attorney. Charlie, good job.
But he's cheap.
What?
So there's money. Brian Klein doesn't do this out of the goodness of his own heart. Brian, if you're listening to this, I'm not saying you're a bad lawyer. I'm just saying you're an expensive lawyer.
Yeah, no. Brian Klein is on my short list of lawyers that if I get in trouble one day in the crypto space.
No. You don't want to be associated with someone. He's got too much fame at this point. So you'd be tied to his other rulings for, the Brightmans, for Shrem. You want your own lawyer who can say, I don't agree with what happened in the past. My client's innocent.
Yeah, and Klein was that lawyer for the case in California, the local Bitcoin dealer, and she went away for like a year and a half or something as well.
And he's representing Kathleen and Arthur. Charlie, Chase, come in here.
Well, wait, Kathleen and Arthur, what is that case again?
The Brightmans for Tezos.
Oh, the Brightmans for Tezos. Yeah, that's right. My bad. Yeah, see, I don't know, like the Tezos is so like, I'm so not.
Come here, Charlie. Chase, stay away. Why don't you have clothing on? Come here. Charlie, come here. Okay, this is it. I have to go put children to bed.
Aw.
So,
your kids are adorable.
bye, everybody.
Yeah, they're super cute.
Okay, guys. Have a good night. We'll see you guys next week.
Yeah,
Right,
thank you.
Bye, guys.
All right,
Bye.
Sasha, you and I are gonna close this out. Yeah, so I gotta read this article. Like, it's crazy how news is breaking as we're doing the show.
I know,
like,
right?
we don't have time to like read and prep for this.
Well,
Um,
I had to send that course I'm doing in a week. I had to send the slides to a graphic designer, and all the laws have changed in the past week. Not all of them, but like it's I don't have anything about these. I like actually talked about centralized versus decentralized exchanges, and that's got to change. And anyway, yeah.
yeah, so this is going to be really, really interesting. But again, the only thing that makes this case interesting is the names, is the fact that
Mhm.
it's Winklevi and Charlie. Like in reality, this stuff happened all the time back in 2012, back in 2013. There's like hundreds of these cases. And the only reason why this is news is because of the names.
Well, I wonder if it's gonna everyone on BitInstant should go do a forensic accounting and see, if he was skimming off them, he probably skimmed off everyone on there.
Hey, it's like
I
it's
can't,
gonna be.
yeah, I shouldn't make any accusation. That was wrong to say. But if, it's the
Sorry,
mindset
Charlie.
to do it once is whatever. Sorry.
No, but no, it's okay. No, but I did hear like even like from like stories from people that were doing it, but like that Charlie didn't have like the best accounting practices, and people are like, hey, Charlie, where's my Bitcoin? Send it over, and then he would send it over. Those were the stories that I heard. But yeah, so this is interesting. So I think collectability is going to be very tricky, very, very tricky, and this is going to be one public trial, one public case in the world of crypto because of the names, and it's all because of the names.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I think we're good. We're coming up on 2 hours, and we did have other things to talk about. We were going to talk about the Senate hearings and everything that has come out of Coin Center from Peter Van Valkenburg's testimony to Coin Center trying to get a bill through Congress. We were also going to talk about, I can't believe I'm showing an article from ETH News, which is ridiculous, but they did quote our Drew Hinkes extensively about it being bad on, naming what a blockchain is in case law. We're going to briefly mention about the Chinese and Hong Kong regulations, and we're going to talk about the global reach of the U.S. security laws and this tweet right here from Larry Cermak. I'm not sure if he's a lawyer. I'm assuming
I
he
think
is.
he is, yeah.
It looks like he can be in high school, but I'm assuming he's a lawyer. Talking about how the implications of these, again, comments by Hinman that maybe Ethereum is not a security, but XRP and BNB are, and if Ethereum launched today, it certainly would be a security. So these are all going to be the topics for our next week's show, along with,
Whatever else.
the article of Politico, which implies that a lot of the promoters of these ICOs could be in serious trouble. So this is our agenda. This is going to be our agenda for next week, but I'm assuming we're going to scrap all of that because so much more news is going to come out between now and next week. This has to be a weekly show once again. There's just too much stuff going on in the law. And yeah, thank you so much, Sasha. Any final thoughts?
Yeah, I think nothing too major, but it's I think we're seeing, like, when I was going through the SEC enforcement actions just to get ready for that course, and it seems like almost every week a new one is coming out. So it really looks like they were ramping up here, and they gave their first notice well over a year ago now. And actually, that at Lawmaster guy, Larry, I think it's Cermak, that you just had his Twitter account up earlier. He, a few weeks ago, put out a post showing how much the government was spending in enforcement in every area. It was really interesting. I'll try and find it and send it to you, but it shows just, they're really directing a lot of assets towards enforcement here. So it's kind of, I don't know, it's an uneasy feeling. Big Brother's always watching us.
Yeah, please send that over to me, because next week we're definitely going to talk about the global reach of the US security laws, because I'm so tired of all of these people telling me that Binance is untouchable. And that's just ridiculous.
Yeah, just the same way that Ether Delta got, or sorry, that one broker, in Austria, it's the exact same scenario. They can get jurisdiction as soon as they say one of the tokens on Binance is a security, which I think,
Well, no, but
by
no, it's funny. It's not even that. That's not even my problem. It's not that the Binance is trading security tokens. That's a problem. My bigger problem is that Binance
the
itself
Binance token.
and the Binance token is itself in violation of security laws. So they're actually breaking. I don't know if Binance KYCs or not. I'm not sure. I'm assuming they don't because of how many people trade there. Like I can tell whether your crypto company KYCs, because when you don't, you have like 10x the volume of those that do. So like no one trades on Poloniex anymore because they KYC. So A, Binance doesn't KYC, that's a violation. B, Binance trades securities, that's a violation. And C, which is my biggest problem with Binance, because a lot of people do 1 and 2, Binance is the only one that is independent, that by themselves is a violation of security law with a BNB token that they're using inside Binance. So which is why I think Binance is the biggest risk out of all of the exchanges. And if you have your crypto on Binance, it's a giant risk because they're breaking the maximum number of US security laws, in my opinion, in my non-lawyer, non-professional opinion.
I think I would agree with you. And they have the largest volume, so they have the most money to fight against the SEC. So that's why the SEC is like a big bully going after these people that aren't fighting back. And then it's getting all these people saying not fighting, and then the precedent is getting set. So then by the time they come to Binance, they might have 10 other exchanges that they've deemed are securities or are in other, plenty of violations, and then they can go after them with that.
Right, that is true. But by printing your own money and becoming popular, Binance has a lot of money to fight the SEC. But also because Binance has so much volume and because Binance is so popular, it also puts a lot of eyes from the SEC on Binance. So it's not always a good thing to be like, usually you want to be at the top of the list. If you're going to be on the list, you really want to be somewhere in the middle of that list. You don't want to be a low-hanging fruit. And you also don't want to be at the top of the list, breaking in violation of so many different aspects. And this is what took down one broker. They were just in violation of too many aspects. It was the KYC problem, the CFD problem, the fact that they were doing CFDs on registered securities. Those were 3 major issues, and they were outside of the US. Their people were not American, and they still got taken down. And I think that Binance is also in violation of 3 things. But again, we're going to save it for next week. I want to do a deeper dive into Binance the way we did a deep dive into Ravencoin a few weeks ago. And hopefully, if CZ wants to pull a Bruce Fenton and come on the lawyer show so you guys can perhaps explain to him the way it was explained to Bruce Fenton as to where the problem might be. That would be great. Maybe I will reach out, but I normally don't like it when people come on. A, I don't want them to incriminate themselves, and B, this is not exactly a debate show. This is more of experts explaining, but we will see what's going on there. All right. On this note, any other final thoughts, Sasha?
Sign the Free Ross petition.
All right. Thank you very much, guys. And thank you for watching. Once again, this has been another episode of the Bitcoin Law Review. In this episode, we discussed, Binance and launching Ravencoin. And just to follow up from the show before, we discussed the ETH Delta, crackdown by the SEC, the final ruling and settlement on that. We talked about the one broker shutdown, and we also talked about the Winklevi versus Charlie Shrem lawsuit. We'll bring you a lot more stuff next episode. Please check out tonebase.com. If you like this show and you want to support the show, please check out the affiliates page. And I will see you all on another podcast. And probably going to talk about the price of Bitcoin once again in the near future. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all on the next one.